There are 5 ways to force an avoidant to become obsessed with you according to science. And once you use what I'm about to teach you, an avoidant will never look at you the same way again. We'll start first with way number 1. Build in pressure release valves. Avoidants are a lot like volcanoes. On the outside, they look calm, composed, even untouchable. But underneath, pressure is constantly building. And if that pressure has no escape, eventually it erupts. That's when you see the classic avoidant behaviors. You know, the sudden pulling away, the stonewalling, or the breakup that comes out of nowhere. So let's say you and your partner spend an amazing weekend together. You go on dates, you're staying up late talking. Maybe you even share those rare, vulnerable moments where they finally open up to you. From your side, it feels like progress. Naturally, you're going to want to keep the momentum going. So you send them a sweet good morning text. Then you send them another text during lunch, then another at night. You're just trying to connect, but inside their mind, something else is probably happening. Every message, every check-in, every "I miss you" is like another pocket of pressure being added to the volcano. Now, at first, they feel warm and close, but then it crosses a threshold. Think of this like the point of no return. And they erupt. They'll either yell at you, or worse, they break up with you on the spot. Here's the thing about avoidance. They don't actually hate closeness. In fact, deep down, they crave it just like anyone else. But their nervous system was wired early on to link intimacy with danger. Growing up, they often learned that needing someone meant getting hurt and rejected or smothered. So now, when they feel that bond starting to form, their body reacts as if closeness itself is a threat. No, for avid watchers of this channel, I'm not saying anything revolutionary here. I say this literally all the time. But it's here where the science comes in. There's something called the Yerkes-Dodson law, which shows that performance and motivation peak at a certain level of arousal. But once stress goes beyond that point, everything basically collapses. For avoidance, intimacy creates the same curve. A little closeness feels good, but too much closeness feels overwhelming. Push them past their threshold and they'll shut down as a way to escape the pressure. So what can you do? Well, I want you to imagine our volcano again. Picture how terrifying it is when all that pressure builds with no escape. The ground shakes, the air fills with smoke, and then it blows. But what if volcanoes came with built-in release valves? Tiny channels that let the lava drain out safely, keeping everything at a manageable level. Instead of violent eruptions, you'd get these small, steady releases. No destruction, no sudden chaos, just stability. That's exactly what we're trying to do with an avoidant. Their inner world is just like that volcano. Intimacy builds pressure inside them, and without a way to release it, the only option their system knows is to erupt by pulling away or shutting down or ending things. But when you create little release valves after moments of closeness, giving them micro bursts of space, freedom, or autonomy, you're draining that lava before it ever reaches a dangerous level. And the psychology behind this is pretty powerful. It keeps them in that sweet spot of the Yerkes-Dodson curve, where connection feels exciting but not overwhelming. In that range, the avoidant doesn't feel trapped. They feel safe. And safety is what turns their instinct to run into an instinct to stay. Let's move on to way number 2 now. The avoidant fantasy, the 5 core traits. Okay, I did this video a few weeks ago entitled "Avoidants Break Their Own Rules When You Fit This Fantasy." And basically, I used Frankenstein's monster to create an analogy of the perfect person an avoidant would obsess over. The qualities, essentially, that they couldn't resist. And ironically, there were 5. We had the head of the monster first, which is meant to represent the independent mind. Basically, they're craving someone who thinks for themselves, has no constant need for validation or approval, and independence basically signals that you're not going to suffocate them. Now, next up is the heart, basically equating to emotional safety without pressure. This is someone who can create warmth, openness, and presence without the clinginess. So they're comfortable essentially sitting in silence, not filling space with just this constant reassurance seeking. And it's someone who lets them connect without fearing the loss of autonomy. Then we have the hands, which is supposed to represent self-sufficiency. Someone who essentially has their own passions, goals, and structures, and doesn't drop everything for the relationship. They show the avoidant that they won't be relied on for survival. Then the spine, which is supposed to equate to unshakable boundaries. This is someone who calmly enforces what's acceptable and what's not, and can walk away if they're being completely disrespected. And ironically, boundaries feel safer to them than blind devotion because it adds a level of predictability. Finally, we have the eyes, which is supposed to represent non-judgmental presence. This is someone who accepts them for their quirks, their flaws, and their need for space, and someone who doesn't essentially try to fix them. Avoidants fear being seen as broken, so unconditional acceptance feels rare and magnetic. I think that the idea of this is that if you embody these traits, the avoidant will naturally become obsessed with you. But that's not actually how it works, because yes, embodying these traits cracks their armor. It can draw them in, it can get them curious, it makes them feel safer than they're used to, but it's only one factor in a much bigger equation. Think of it like electricity. Having the right wires and circuits is essential, but unless all the parts connect, the light bulb is never going to turn on. That's the part that most people forget. You can be independent, warm, and non-judgmental. They can fantasize about you, but if the other pieces aren't in place, that obsession never really ignites. Let's move on to way number 3, the mirror and mute concept. All right, you may have heard the phrase, when they pull back, you pull back. Mirror and mute is essentially the better version of that. It works in 2 steps. First step, when they pull back, you pull back the exact same amount. Our brains are wired with something called mirror neurons. These are little clusters of cells that make us instinctively copy the people around us. When you mirror an avoidance behavior, you're not just matching their energy on the surface, you're actually speaking directly to their nervous system at a subconscious level. Their brain gets the message, hey, this person is safe, they're not going to overwhelm me. Now here's where most people make a big mistake though. They do the whole when they pull back, you pull back mirroring method, and then they just call it a day. But with avoidance, that's often not enough. They're always going to require a second step. You need to hit the mute button on the relationship for a small span of time. Not forever, just for a little while. So what would this actually look like? Well, you stop initiating contact at all. You don't send good morning texts. You don't check in just to see how they're doing. You don't invite them to plans to share updates about your day. You want to know who is really good at mirror and mute? Bella here, who by her own admission says, none of this could have been possible without no contact. She also says that no contact isn't just about talking to your ex, it's about intense personal growth. That's the aspect of the mute that most people miss. In Bella's own words, the program really does work, but for me, it helped me recognize the real issue, which was that I needed to practice some self-love first. Bella, of course, was a member of my community, which you can get immediate access to in the Seiter Super Offer. You get weekly live streams with me and my coaching team, every course I've ever created, a battle buddy, and access to the community, all for 50% off. And all you have to do is click the link below to claim the discount. All right, let's move on to way number 4, utilizing the Zeigarnik effect. Oh, I've talked about this ad nauseum, and here I am again. The Zeigarnik effect is a psychological phenomenon where people remember unfinished or interrupted experiences better than completed ones. Think about how Netflix structures their dramas. Right when a scene is about to give you the answer, boom, cut to black, next episode in 5 seconds. They know your brain can't stand that unresolved tension, so you click next without even thinking. In avoidance, they actually work the exact same way. Here's a graph to illustrate this. On the x-axis, you've got time spent talking. On the y-axis, you've got emotional engagement and excitement. Now, at first, the line rises. You're both connecting, you're laughing, you're vibing. Then, like every conversation, it starts to plateau and dip once things drag on. What most anxious partners do, though, is they keep talking through that dip. They over-explain, they overshare, or push for more closeness. And the avoidance brain essentially checks out. But the counterintuitive move is this. End the conversation while it's still peaking. Cut it short before the line drops. Leave them with that sense of, wait, I wanted more. That's you triggering the Zeigarnik effect. And when you become the person who always leaves them curious instead of drained, you stop being the show that they binge and get bored of and start being the cliffhanger they can't stop thinking about. Now, why does this work? Well, it works because leaving things open keeps their mind hooked. So instead of feeling overwhelmed or trapped, they get to replay that last exciting moment in their head over and over, making them crave more. Now, if you want an avoidant to think about you nonstop, don't drag things out. End the conversation while it's still good. And that leads us to my very favorite way to get them obsessed. Way number 5, the slot machine theory. This is without a doubt my favorite one to talk about because it's the closest thing to a hack for an avoidant brain. I call it the intermittent spotlight. See, one of the fastest ways to hook someone's attention, not just an avoidant, but any human brain, is through something called intermittent reinforcement. It's the exact same psychological mechanism that makes casinos billions every single year. Here's how it works. If you walk up to a slot machine, pull the lever, and win every single time, it eventually stops being exciting. You know the reward is guaranteed and there's no suspense. If you pull the lever and never win, you'll actually get bored and then walk away. But if you win just enough to keep you guessing, you'll sit there all night chasing the next jackpot. Now, I want you to take that same principle and overlay it onto avoidance. If you're constantly attentive, texting back within 5 seconds, you're always available, always saying yes, their nervous system adapts. It no longer registers as special. In fact, to an avoidant, too much closeness can feel quite overwhelming. They'll start devaluing it, telling themselves, this is too much. I don't actually want this. Now, on the other hand, if you go constantly distant, if you're ignoring them completely and you're never responding and you're never giving warmth, they don't chase. They just shut down. They disengage because rejection is something they've rehearsed their whole life. But if you strike that delicate balance, if you can be warm and engaged sometimes and then unavailable other times without explanation and without hostility, something fascinating begins to happen. Their brain goes into anticipation mode. They start asking themselves, wait, when are they going to reach out? Why did they pull away right when things were going so well? Did I do something? Are they losing interest? That little voice in their head, that's actually the Zeigarnik effect blending with the slot machine principle. Unpredictability plus unfinished tension. And this is what bypasses their defenses. An avoidant is used to controlling the pace of intimacy by pushing people away when they feel too close. But when you become the one who sometimes gives them the jackpot, this burst of warmth, a spark of connection, a moment where they feel completely seen, and then you naturally return to your own world, you're rewriting the rules of the game. So instead of you being the pursuer and them being the runner, now they're the one wondering. They don't know when the next dopamine hit of your attention is coming. And that uncertainty makes their mind loop back to you over and over. I think the key here, though, is subtlety. This isn't about some manipulation or playing these cold games. It's just about not being predictable. So when you feel genuinely warm, lean into it. When you need space or you're busy with your own life, take it. Don't justify it. Don't over-explain. Just go. And most importantly, don't fall into a pattern. Keep it organic. That's what creates the intermittent spotlight. Because for an avoidant, the fastest way to kill attraction is to be predictable, either smothering them or ghosting them. But when you master the rhythm of unpredictability, you stop being background noise and start being the jackpot that they can't stop pulling for. And this is where people usually get it wrong. They hear one strategy, maybe it's mirror and mute, maybe it's the Zeigarnik effect, maybe it's that slot machine pull principle, and they think, you know what, this is it. That's the silver bullet that's going to make my avoidant obsessed with me. Here's the truth. No single strategy is ever enough. Remember that Frankenstein ideal that we talked about earlier? Avoidants aren't pulled in by just one quality. They piece together these little fragments, independence here, mystery there, a flash of warmth when they least expect it, and even the restraint to step back before things feel overwhelming. It's not one move. It's the combination of moves that breaks through their walls. Think of it again like a slot machine. One pull doesn't do it. Two pulls doesn't do it. But the irregular mix of wins and losses wires the brain to keep playing. It's the pattern of unpredictability, the push and pull, the moments of connection followed by space, the hints that you're growing in ways they don't expect. That makes their minds start looping back to you even when they swore that they were done. So if you're here hoping for one magic key, I think that's the wrong way to see it. The real power comes when you stack these dynamics together. That's when the avoidant stops telling themselves, hey, I figured them out, I don't need this, and starts thinking, why can't I stop thinking about them?